There's a question almost no one asks, and it's not about God, it's about you. Why do some people feel such an urgent need to prove that God does not exist? Pay attention to the detail. It's not about not believing, it's about testing, arguing, taking apart. Someone who is merely indifferent is indifferent in silence. They don't post, they don't discuss, they don't get irritated when someone mentions faith at dinner. But there is another type, a very specific type, the one who can't hear the word God without rolling their eyes, who always needs the last argument, who treats other people's faith as a personal offense. And that's where psychology starts to speak louder than philosophy. Because when someone attacks an idea with force disproportionate to its importance in their own life, that idea is not dead within that person. She is alive, just repressed. Subscribe to the channel before continuing. What comes next will disturb you in a way you didn't expect when you clicked on this video. This is not apologetics. It is not catechism. It is not religious discourse. This video treats atheism as all human behavior should be treated, as a psychological phenomenon, because every extreme intellectual stance has, at its core, an emotional root. This applies to the religious fanatic, and it applies to the militant atheist. Carl Jung said something that few have dared to digest. What we deny most strongly is usually what dwells deepest within us. He called this the shadow. The part you reject continues to govern you, only now, behind your back. And here is the thesis of this video. Much of modern atheism is not a conclusion. It's a reaction. It's not the end of a rational investigation. It's the beginning of an emotional defense. Those who don't believe in elves don't write books against elves. They don't make videos against elves. They don't spend nights arguing with those who believe in elves. But with God, it's different. There's activism, irritation, urgency. And this urgency is the first psychological clue because it reveals that the issue hasn't been resolved internally. It's just been pushed into a corner of the mind where it continues to cause discomfort. The person is not at peace with the non-existence of God. They are at war with it. There is a very common pattern. Disbelief becomes identity. It becomes a brand. It becomes a sign of superior intelligence. I am rational. I think. I am not like the others. Notice that the phrase isn't about God. It's about the ego. Disbelief in this case doesn't function as a philosophical conclusion. It functions as a badge, as an invisible diploma that separates the person from the mass they despise. And those who need to feel intellectually superior to others are usually compensating for an insecurity that predates philosophy. It almost always stems from childhood. From the moment the person discovered that being the smart one was the only way to be loved, noticed, and respected. Intelligence has ceased to be a tool. It has become a shield. Believing in something greater than yourself requires a specific attitude, admitting that you are not the center of attention, that you don't control everything, that there are things beyond your comprehension. And this, for certain psychological structures, is unbearable, not for logical reasons, for emotional reasons. People who grew up in environments where showing vulnerability was dangerous develop a deep aversion to any form of surrender, and God, symbolically, is the ultimate surrender. That's when the mind blocks it. It doesn't block it because believing is irrational. It blocks it because needing it is risky. Almost every militant atheist you talk to in depth will have, at some point in their past, a specific scene, a religious and violent father, a mother who used God as a threat, a pastor who disappointed them, a church that excluded them, an unanswered prayer on the worst night of their life. And the mind, which is a survival machine, makes a silent association. If religion caused pain, then God is to blame. If God is to blame, it's easier to eliminate him than to reopen the wound. The person believes they are rejecting an abstract idea, but they are in fact taking revenge on a specific memory. That's why, for many people, atheism doesn't seem like philosophy. It seems like unprocessed grief. There is a type of person who has turned reason into a personal religion. Everything needs proof. Everything needs a method. But pay attention, this person doesn't apply this rigor to everything in life. They don't demand scientific proof before falling in love. They don't require a method before feeling longing. Logic, in this case, is selective. It appears precisely in the territories where emotion would be too dangerous. Because logic, taken to its extreme, is the last refuge of those who have learned that feeling is risky. If you've made it this far, leave a like, and tell me in the comments which of these signs bothered you the most. This is the hardest one to admit. During the day, everything works. The work, the routine, the achievements. Disbelief seems solid, but there is a time, a moment that no one chooses, usually late at night. The house is silent, and you're there, staring at the ceiling. And then it comes, that strange feeling that something is missing. Not a person, not an object. Something deeper, something you can't name. You dismiss it quickly. You attribute it to tiredness, to loneliness. But the feeling returns and returns and returns, because human beings weren't built merely to function. They were built to have meaning. And when meaning is taken away, a void remains that no amount of productivity can fill. When you remove any notion of something bigger from the map, one logical conclusion remains. Nothing means nothing. You are matter. Your pain is chemistry. Your story is chance. Your end is erasure. Intellectually, many say, okay, I accept it. I'm mature enough. But the body won't accept it. The mind won't accept it. Because living without purpose is, in practice, unsustainable. And these questions don't come during the day. They appear in the moments when the mask falls, when the diagnosis arrives, when the child is born, when the father dies, when life forces a person to stop. In those moments, reason falls silent, because reason is good at explaining the world, but it's terrible at bearing the burden alone. There's a very common saying, I don't need anything besides myself. It sounds powerful. It sounds liberating. But observe what this phrase produces in practice over the years. It produces isolation, people who can no longer ask for help, who treat any external support as a sign of moral weakness. Self-sufficiency, taken to the extreme, ceases to be a virtue. It becomes a prison. Because that's what the ego does when it occupies the place of the sacred. It promises autonomy, but delivers exile. This is the most hidden sign, and the most human. Because behind every frequently repeated certainty lies a very old doubt. Those who are at peace don't need to repeat themselves. Those who are secure don't need to convince anyone. Those who are secure don't need to attack. And that's why there's so much noisy activism against something that supposedly doesn't even exist. Because deep down, in a place that person hasn't visited in years, there's a nagging suspicion. What if I'm wrong? Now breathe. Because what I'm about to say is not an attack. It's not a provocation. This video wasn't made to tell you what to believe. It was made to show you one thing. Much of what seems like conviction is, in fact, defense. Much of what seems logical is, in fact, wounded. Much of what seems like freedom is, in fact, escape. And this doesn't just apply to atheists. It applies to religious people who use God as an excuse to run away from themselves. It applies to the skeptic who uses reason to escape their own pain. Because the truth is that nobody is an atheist, religious, skeptical, or believer simply for the sake of argument. Everyone is, first and foremost, someone trying to survive their own story. And perhaps the most honest question isn't, does God exist? Perhaps the question is, what is it within me that I'm so afraid to discover exists? Or, what is it within me that I'm so afraid to discover doesn't exist? Because in the end, it's not God who's on judgment. It's you. It's your courage to look inside without walls, without badges, without ideology. It's your courage to admit that maybe you don't know. And perhaps it is precisely in this I don't know that for the first time in life, some real form of truth resides. If this video touched you, leave a like. Comment with one word, what resonated with you. And if you're ready to go deeper, the next video is already appearing on the screen. Click on it now, before that courage fades, because we only watch videos like this when our soul asks for it. And yours, you just asked for it.